A flight attendant's mocking laughter echoes through the first-class cabin as she looks at a black man's ticket. She sees a young man in a hoodie, not the millionaire she expects in seat 1A. To her, he doesn't belong. But she's about to learn a lesson that will cost her everything. That man she just ridiculed, he doesn't just have a ticket. He owns the plane, the crew, the gate, and the entire airline. Stay tuned to witness the moment a single act of prejudice triggers an avalanche of karma that will leave you speechless. The air in the jet bridge was stale, a mixture of recycled cabin air and the faint scent of jet fuel. But Marcus Thorne barely noticed. He was focused, his mind a whirlwind of balance sheets, acquisition strategies, and the final intricate details of the deal that had consumed the last 6 months of his life. At 34, Marcus had just become the majority shareholder of AeroVantage Airlines, one of North America's largest carriers. It was a hostile takeover, a brutal, brilliant campaign that had left Wall Street analysts reeling and established him as a formidable player in the corporate world. Yet, looking at him, you wouldn't know it. He was dressed for comfort, not for a boardroom. A simple, dark grey hoodie, a pair of well-worn jeans, and a pair of pristine Nike sneakers. A black baseball cap was pulled low over his brow, and noise-canceling headphones hung around his neck. He was flying from New York to Los Angeles, a cross-country hop he'd made 100 times. This time, however, was different. This time, he wasn't just a passenger. He was the owner. He carried a single worn leather backpack, its contents worth more than the plane itself, a laptop with encrypted files, deal memos, and the blueprint for the airline's future. He preferred to travel light, unencumbered. It was a philosophy that had served him well in life and in business. As he stepped from the jet bridge into the wide, hushed cabin of the Airbus A380, he felt a flicker of satisfaction. The cream and navy blue decor, the soft glow of the mood lighting the quiet efficiency of the crew, this was all his now. He had plans, big plans to elevate AeroVantage from a legacy carrier into the undisputed leader in global aviation. He found his way to the first-class suite, an exclusive enclave at the front of the upper deck. A flight attendant, a woman with sharp features, blonde hair, pulled back in a severe bun, and a name tag that read, Jessica, stood guard at the entrance. She looked him up and down, a barely concealed flicker of disdain in her eyes. Her smile was a thin, painted-on line that didn't reach her cold blue eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone dripping with a saccharine condescension that set Marcus's teeth on edge. It was a tone he was all too familiar with, the kind reserved for people who were deemed out of place. "Good morning," Marcus replied, his voice calm and even. He held out his phone, the screen displaying his boarding pass for Suite 1A. "Just finding my seat." Jessica's eyes darted from his face to his hoodie and then to the phone in his hand. She took a deliberate step forward, blocking his path. "First class is for our premier passengers," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if she were letting him in on a secret. "The economy cabin is on the lower deck. Perhaps you're on the wrong level?" Marcus held her gaze, refusing to be baited. He'd faced down corporate raiders and cutthroat CEOs. A snippy flight attendant was hardly an intimidation. "I think I'm in the right place," he said, gesturing again with his phone. "Suite 1A. With an exaggerated sigh, Jessica took the phone from him. Her perfectly manicured finger tapped the screen, and she stared at it for a long moment. A slow, incredulous smile spread across her face. And then it happened. A laugh. It wasn't a chuckle or a giggle. It was a loud, braying laugh that cut through the quiet ambiance of the cabin. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated mockery. "Oh, that's priceless," she cackled, handing the phone back to him as if it were contaminated. "A photoshopped boarding pass. That's a new one. Honey, the effort is almost impressive, but this is Suite 1A. This seat is a five-figure ticket. Do you really think you can just waltz in here?" The laughter echoed and heads began to turn. A businessman in a tailored suit in Suite 2B peered over his newspaper. A woman in pearls in 3F lowered her magazine. The cabin, once an oasis of calm, was now charged with a tense, uncomfortable energy. Jessica was playing to an audience, positioning herself as the gatekeeper of this exclusive world and casting Marcus as the imposter. Marcus felt a familiar hot surge of anger, but he forced it down, burying it under a layer of ice-cold control. He had learned long ago that reacting with anger was a losing game. It was what they expected, what they wanted. It validated their prejudice. "It's not photoshopped," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "It's my seat. If you'd like to verify it with the gate agent or scan it with your own device, please feel free." His composure seemed to infuriate her even more. "Oh, I don't need to scan it," she sneered, crossing her arms. "I have eyes. We have a certain caliber of clientele in first class. You don't fit the profile." The words hung in the air, ugly and undisguised. "You don't fit the profile." It was the same sentiment he had faced his entire life, from teachers who steered him away from advanced classes to bank loan officers who denied his first business proposals to country club managers who asked to see his membership card 3 times in one evening. It was the uniform of a prejudice that was as persistent as it was poisonous. "And what profile is that exactly?" Marcus asked, his gaze unwavering. Jessica just smirked, a cruel, triumphant twist of her lips. "Let's just say our frequent flyers in these suites don't usually shop in the urban section. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual passengers to attend to. Why don't you go find your real seat before I have to call security and have you removed for causing a disturbance?" She turned her back on him, a gesture of final dismissive contempt. Her laughter, though quieter now, still seemed to hang in the air, a toxic cloud of arrogance and ignorance. She walked over to another passenger, her demeanor instantly transforming into one of fawning servitude. Marcus stood there for a moment, the eyes of the other passengers on him. He could feel their judgment, their suspicion, their quiet affirmation of the flight attendant's assessment. He was an anomaly, an error in the system. In their world, a black man in a hoodie didn't belong in Suite 1A. He took a slow breath, his mind shifting from the anger of the moment to the cold, hard reality of the situation. This woman, Jessica, in her crisp Aero Vantage uniform, was the face of his new company. Her behavior, her prejudice, was a direct reflection on the brand he had just spent billions to acquire. This wasn't just a personal insult anymore. This was a business problem, a cancer in his own organization, and he knew with chilling certainty that it was a problem he would have to deal with. Not later. Now. He took another step into the cabin, his resolve hardening like steel. The laughter had stopped, but the confrontation had only just begun. The silence that followed Jessica's cackling departure was somehow louder and more damning than the laugh itself. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket of awkwardness, thick with unspoken thoughts. The businessman in 2B quickly hid behind his Wall Street Journal, but his eyes darted over the top. The woman in pearls fumbled with her carry-on, suddenly intensely interested in its contents. No one met Marcus's eye. They were witnesses, but they were not allies. Their silence was a form of complicity. Marcus remained standing, a statue of calm, in a sea of discomfort. He could have retreated, found an empty seat in business class, and dealt with the issue from a distance. But that wasn't his style. Retreat was a form of acceptance, an admission that Jessica's assessment held some merit. He owned this ground. He would not cede it. Just as he was about to speak, another crew member bustled up the aisle. This was Karen, the senior flight attendant, a woman whose years of service were etched into the faint lines around her eyes and the practiced, authoritative set of her jaw. Her smile was just as plastic as Jessica's, but it was wielded with more precision. "Is there a problem here?" Karen asked, her eyes flicking from Marcus's impassive face to the open door of Suite 1A. Jessica, seeing her superior arrive, glided back to her side, a look of vindicated self-importance on her face. This man was trying to get into Suite 1A. "Karen," Jessica said, her voice laced with the drama of a thwarted crime. "I told him this was first class, but he's insisting. He showed me a fake boarding pass on his phone." Karen's gaze settled on Marcus, her expression hardening. She was the veteran, the one who had seen every trick in the book. Her job was to maintain order, and in her eyes, Marcus was a disruption to that order. "Sir," she said, her voice firm, "I'm going to have to ask you to deplane. We can sort this out at the gate. If you've made a mistake with your booking, our agents will be happy to assist you." The use of the word mistake was deliberate, a gentler but no less insulting version of Jessica's accusation. They were a team, a united front of crisp uniforms and practiced authority, and he was the outsider. "There's no mistake," Marcus said, his voice retaining its unnerving calm. "The only mistake is the assumption being made by your crew." He looked from Karen to Jessica, a penetrating gaze that seemed to peel back their professional veneers. "I'd advise you to check your passenger manifest before you escalate this. Check the name, Thorne, Thrne. He dropped the name like a stone into a still pond. He wasn't just any Thorne. He was the Thorne, a name that had been all over the financial news for the past 48 hours. It was a calculated risk. He was testing them, giving them one last chance to do their job, to look past the hoodie and see the truth. Jessica scoffed. "Thorne, right. And I'm a Rockefeller. Sir, you're delaying our departure. I'm not going to ask you again." Karen pulled out her crew device, a small tablet used for internal communications and flight details. She tapped on the screen with an air of theatrical impatience, intending to call security. But as she did, the passenger manifest was visible for a split second. And there it was, at the very top of the list, under Suite 1A, Thorne Marcus. Beside it, a string of VIP codes and notations that even she, a 30-year veteran, had never seen before. Her fingers froze over the screen. A flicker of doubt, small but undeniable, crossed her face. Jessica didn't see it. Her focus was solely on Marcus, her posture radiating belligerent confidence. "Security is on their way," Jessica announced to the cabin, as if to reassure the other passengers that the threat would soon be neutralized. "That won't be necessary," Marcus said. He pulled out his own phone, not to show them the boarding pass again, but to make a call. He scrolled through his contacts, his thumb hovering over a name, Robert Harrison, COO, Aerovantage. "I believe," Marcus said, looking directly at Karen, whose face was now pale, "that a call to Robert Harrison might clear this up faster than a security detail." The name dropped with the force of a bomb. Robert Harrison was not just some mid-level manager. He was the chief operating officer of the entire airline, a legendary figure within the company known for his ruthless efficiency and his direct line to the board of directors. He was a name that made executives tremble. For a flight attendant to hear it from a passenger in a hoodie was like a parish priest hearing a beggar invoke the Pope by his first name. It was unthinkable. Karen's blood ran cold. The name on the manifest, the VIP codes, the passenger's unnerving calm, and his direct reference to the COO. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture that was so terrifying, so career-ending, that her mind recoiled from it. She looked at Marcus again, really looked at him this time. The quiet confidence, the expensive watch, barely visible under the sleeve of his hoodie, the penetrating intelligence in his eyes. This was not a man who made idle threats. Jessica, however, was still blissfully ignorant. "Robert Harrison, oh please," she sneered, rolling her eyes. "Are you going to tell us you're best friends? That you play golf together, sir? You are truly delusional." But her voice faltered as she saw the look on Karen's face. The older flight attendant was staring at Marcus, her professional mask crumbling to reveal raw dawning horror. She had seen the manifest. She understood the gravity of the name he had just invoked. She understood that they were standing on the precipice of a catastrophic professional blunder. "Jessica," Karen whispered, her voice a strangled rasp. "Stop talking." But it was too late. Marcus had already pressed the call button. The phone was ringing. Through the speaker, a crisp, powerful voice answered on the first ring. "Thorne, what's wrong?" Marcus held the phone up slightly, letting the voice carry in the stunned silence of the cabin. "Robert," he said, his voice as smooth as silk. "We have a bit of a situation on Flight 762 to LAX. Yes, on the A380. There seems to be some confusion about my seat. In fact, 2 of your crew are about to have me forcibly removed from the aircraft." He paused, a faint, humorless smile touching his lips as he looked at the 2 women. Jessica's face had gone from smug to confused to utterly devastatingly white. Karen looked like she was about to faint. "No, I don't think that will be necessary," Marcus continued into the phone, "but I think it might be best if you came down here yourself. We have a teachable moment on our hands." Before the call to Robert Harrison had even concluded, another figure emerged from the galley. It was David the purser, the man in charge of the entire cabin crew for this flight. He was in his late 40s, with kind eyes and a calm, unflappable demeanor that came from decades of managing in-flight emergencies, from medical situations to celebrity meltdowns. He had been alerted by the palpable tension that had seeped from the first-class cabin like a toxic gas. He took in the scene with a quick, practiced eye, the 2 frozen flight attendants, Jessica's face a mask of disbelief, Karen's a portrait of pure dread, and the passenger, the man in the hoodie, standing with a phone to his ear, his posture relaxed but radiating an authority that was utterly at odds with his attire. David didn't know who he was, but he knew trouble when he saw it. And he knew his crew, particularly Jessica, had a penchant for instigating it. "What in God's name is going on here?" David asked, his voice a low, firm rumble meant to de-escalate, to take control. Karen, snapping out of her stupor, turned to him, her eyes wide with panic. "David, he's on the phone with Mr. Harrison." David's eyebrows shot up. "The Mr. Harrison," he glanced at the passenger, then back at his crew. Jessica, still not fully grasping the abyss she was teetering over, decided to reassert herself. "He's a fraud, David," she insisted, though her voice now carried a tremor of uncertainty. "He was trying to get into 1A. He's making the whole thing up to intimidate us." David held up a hand, silencing her. He had worked with Jessica for 5 years. He knew her. He knew her tendency to make snap judgments, her thinly veiled prejudices, and her sharp tongue, which had been the subject of more than one passenger complaint. He had warned her about it before, in gentle private conversations. He'd advised her that the world was changing, that wealth and status no longer wore a uniform, and that the name on the boarding pass was all that mattered. She had always dismissed his advice as him being too soft. He approached Marcus respectfully. "Sir, I am David Chen, the purser for this flight. I apologize for any misunderstanding. We seem to have a disconnect." Marcus ended his call and pocketed his phone. "The disconnect," he said, his eyes fixed on Jessica, "is with your staff's assumption that my appearance disqualifies me from sitting in a seat I paid for." David nodded slowly, the pieces falling into place. It was exactly the kind of situation he had feared Jessica would create. "I understand, sir. Please allow me to escort you to your suite." He gestured towards 1A, a clear and public reversal of Jessica and Karen's stance. He then turned to his stunned crew. "Karen, please proceed with pre-departure checks. Jessica, a word. In the galley? Now." His tone was soft, but it carried the unyielding weight of command. Jessica, her face flushed with a mixture of anger and humiliation, shot a venomous glare at Marcus before turning on her heel and stalking towards the galley. Inside the small stainless steel space, away from the prying eyes and ears of the passengers, David's gentle demeanor evaporated. "What were you thinking?" he hissed, his voice a furious whisper. "I have warned you about this, Jessica. I have told you time and time again to check your attitude at the door. Who a person is, what they look like, where they come from, it is irrelevant. Our job is to provide service, not to pass judgment." Jessica's defensiveness flared. He was dressed like a thug. What was I supposed to think? He was trying to scam his way into a $15,000 seat. "You were supposed to think he was a passenger," David retorted, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself. "You were supposed to scan his boarding pass, say, 'Welcome aboard, sir,' and move on. That is the job. But you couldn't do that, could you? You had to make it a performance. You had to laugh at him." "He was rude." She muttered, a pathetic attempt at justification. "Was he?" David challenged, leaning closer. "Or did you provoke him? Did you block his path? Did you question his legitimacy in front of a dozen other people? I know how you operate, Jessica. You get a little bit of authority, and it goes straight to your head. You think that uniform makes you royalty." He paced the small space, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "You have no idea the trouble you are in. You think that was a prank call. Do you have any concept of who Robert Harrison is? He doesn't take calls from passengers. If that man has his personal number, then he is someone we cannot afford to offend." Jessica's bravado was finally beginning to crumble, replaced by a creeping dread. "What do you mean? Who is he?" "I don't know," David admitted, exasperated, "but he's in Suite 1A, a seat that is often blocked for board members or UHNWI's ultra-high net worth individuals. And he has the COO on speed dial. You do the math. You haven't just insulted a passenger, you've insulted someone with immense power. Power to end your career with a single email." The reality of David's words began to sink in, cold and terrifying. Her mortgage, her car payments, the medical bills for her ailing mother, it all depended on this job. The benefits, the salary, the pension. She had always taken it for granted, seeing it as her right. The thought that she could lose it all over a man in a hoodie was inconceivable. "It was a mistake," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I can apologize." David let out a hollow laugh. An apology? It's a bit late for that. Don't you think the damage is done? You didn't just insult him, you humiliated him. You laughed in his face. You think a quick sorry is going to fix that? He shook his head, a look of profound disappointment on his face. I've tried to protect you, Jessica. I've covered for you, smoothed things over, tried to mentor you. But this is different. You didn't just break a rule, you embodied everything that is wrong with this industry. That kind of poison, the company purges it. He looked at her, his gaze unwavering. You need to prepare yourself. When Robert Harrison gets here, and believe me, he is coming, you are on your own. I can't help you. No one can. He turned and left the galley, leaving Jessica alone with the humming of the refrigerators and the deafening sound of her own heartbeat. The arrogance and certitude she had felt just minutes before had dissolved into a sickening pool of fear in the pit of her stomach. She leaned against the cold metal counter, the truth of her situation closing in on her. She had picked a fight with a ghost, a man she had already judged and condemned based on the color of his skin and the clothes on his back. And now that ghost was about to reveal himself, and she had a horrifying premonition that he was powerful enough to make her disappear. The 10 minutes that followed felt like an eternity. The normal bustling energy of a pre-departure cabin was gone, replaced by a tense, almost theatrical stillness. Passengers spoke in hushed whispers, stealing glances at Marcus, who now sat comfortably in Suite 1A, sipping a glass of water David had personally brought him. He appeared completely at ease, scrolling through his phone, as if nothing had happened. This calm, more than any outburst, was what unnerved everyone the most. It was the quiet confidence of a man who knows he has already won. Jessica remained in the galley, a ghost herself, trying to compose her features into a mask of professional neutrality, but her trembling hands gave her away. Karen was a robot, moving through the cabin, performing her duties with a jerky, unnatural precision, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Then a subtle shift in the atmosphere signaled his arrival. A sharply dressed gate agent appeared at the cabin door, her expression a mixture of anxiety and reverence. She spoke in a low voice to David, who nodded grimly. A moment later, two figures stepped onto the aircraft. The first was a man in an impeccably tailored Brioni suit. He was in his late 50s, with silver hair, a commanding presence, and an aura of absolute, undiluted power. This was Robert Harrison, the Chief Operating Officer of Vantage Airlines. The second figure was a younger man in a dark suit, clearly an aide clutching a tablet like a shield. The sight of Harrison in the flesh on one of his own planes was so rare that it sent a shockwave through the crew. He was a creature of the executive floor of boardrooms and press conferences. His presence here meant the situation had escalated beyond a mere customer complaint into a full-blown corporate crisis. Harrison's eyes scanned the cabin, his gaze sharp and analytical. He ignored the fawning, terrified crew. He ignored the curious passengers. His eyes locked onto one person, and one person only, the man in the hoodie in Suite 1A. The COO's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The stern, intimidating mask dissolved, replaced by a look of profound respect and genuine concern. He walked directly to Marcus's suite, his stride purposeful. "Mr. Thorne?" Harrison said, his voice resonating with deference. "I came as soon as I got your call. I am so sorry for this. It's inexcusable." The use of Mr. Thorne was the first public blow. It conferred a level of status that Jessica, still watching from the galley doorway, couldn't process. Marcus looked up from his phone, his expression unreadable. "Robert, thank you for coming down." He didn't stand up. He didn't have to. The power dynamic in the small space was overwhelmingly clear. Harrison, one of the most powerful men in the aviation industry, was standing before Marcus like a subordinate reporting to his superior. "What happened here?" Harrison demanded, turning his furious gaze on David, who stood a respectful distance away. "My office gets a priority alert, a level 1 alert. I might add something reserved for a hijacking or a crash, and I find out it's because a member of my own crew is refusing to seat a passenger, our most important passenger." He spat the words out, each one a venomous dart aimed at the terrified staff. "It was a misunderstanding, sir," David began, but Harrison cut him off. "A misunderstanding," he roared, his voice now echoing through the silent cabin. "It's my understanding that your flight attendants accused Mr. Thorne of fraud, laughed in his face, and threatened to have him arrested. Is that what passes for a misunderstanding at Aero Vantage these days?" He turned to Jessica, who was now fully exposed, her face ashen. He pointed a trembling, angry finger at her. "You, what is your name?" Jessica." She stammered, her voice a reedy whisper. "Jessica." Harrison repeated the name, sounding like a curse on his lips. "Do you have any idea who this is?" Jessica shook her head, her eyes pleading. The world was tilting on its axis, and she couldn't find her footing. Harrison let the question hang in the air, a moment of pure dramatic tension. He turned back to Marcus, then swept his gaze across the entire first-class cabin, ensuring he had everyone's undivided attention. His voice dropped, becoming clear and lethally precise. "Let me educate you all," he announced. "This is Marcus Thorne, and for those of you who have not been reading the financial pages for the last 2 days, let me be clearer. As of 9:00 a.m. yesterday, Mr. Thorne's private equity firm, Obsidian Capital, completed its acquisition of a 58% controlling stake in this airline." A collective gasp went through the cabin. The businessman in 2B lowered his paper completely. The woman in pearls stared, her mouth agape. Harrison wasn't finished. He gestured around the cabin, at the plush seats, the polished wood, the very air they were breathing. "This jet, it's his. The gate agent who scanned your ticket, his employee. The pilots in the cockpit, the mechanics on the ground, the schedulers, the baggage handlers, me." He jabbed a thumb at his own chest. "Every single one of us works for him." He paused, letting the full weight of the revelations sink in. Then he delivered the final devastating line, his eyes boring into Jessica's. "You didn't just insult a first-class passenger young lady. You didn't just try to eject a VIP from his seat. You stood in the cabin of his own plane, looked the new owner of this entire goddamn airline in the face, and you laughed at him." The words struck Jessica with the force of a physical blow. The truth was so monstrous, so far beyond the realm of what she had considered possible, that her mind simply broke. The floor seemed to fall away, plunging her into a black, silent void of her own making. The hoodie, the sneakers, the color of his skin, she had built a prison of prejudice and locked herself inside it. Marcus Thorne. The man she had ridiculed, the man she had threatened, the man she had deemed unworthy of her world, didn't just belong in Suite 1A. He owned it all. And she, in her breathtaking arrogance, had just committed career suicide in front of the one man who held her entire future in the palm of his hand. The silence that followed Harrison's revelation was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air and noise and arrogance out of the cabin. For a moment, it felt as if the plane itself was holding its breath. The only sound was the faint, high-pitched hum of the auxiliary power unit, a sound no one had noticed until now. Jessica stood frozen, a statue of horrified realization. The color had drained from her face, leaving a pasty, grey pallor. Her mouth was slightly open, as if to speak, but no words came out. Her mind was a chaotic slideshow of the last 20 minutes. Her own sneering face, her condescending tone, her braying laugh. Each memory was now a fresh stab of agony. She saw her life, her career, her future crumbling into dust at her feet. Robert Harrison, his face still a thundercloud of rage, took a step towards her. His voice, when he spoke, was low and guttural, a sound of pure fury. "You are a disgrace to this uniform. You are an embarrassment to this company. You are the living embodiment of the rot I have been trying to cut out of this airline for years." He turned to David. "Get her off my plane. Get her off my property. Her employment with AeroVantage is terminated effective immediately. I want her security credentials revoked before she even reaches the terminal. I want her final paycheck docked for the cost of the delay she caused. And I want a full written report from every crew member who witnessed this on my desk by the time we land in Los Angeles." Each sentence was a hammer blow, not just to Jessica, but to the entire crew. Karen, who had stood by and tacitly endorsed Jessica's actions, visibly flinched. She knew her own name would be in that report, her own failure of leadership a prominent feature. David simply nodded, his expression grim. This was the outcome he had predicted, but seeing it unfold was still sickening. "And you," Harrison said, his gaze falling upon Karen, "your judgment is clearly compromised. You're on administrative leave pending a full review. Go, now." Karen, tears welling in her eyes, nodded meekly and scurried away without a word, her 30-year career hanging by a thread. Jessica finally found her voice, a desperate pleading squeak. "Mr. Harrison, please. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. I am so sorry." She turned her desperate, tear-filled eyes to Marcus, who had remained silent throughout the entire exchange. "Mr. Thorne, please, I'll do anything. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please, don't do this." This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The public apology, the groveling. But it was too late. It was a plea for mercy, not an expression of genuine remorse. She wasn't sorry for her prejudice. She was sorry she had been caught. Marcus finally spoke. His voice wasn't angry or triumphant. It was quiet, analytical, and utterly devastating. "Your apology is irrelevant," he said, his gaze meeting hers. There was no pity in his eyes, only a cold, hard assessment. "You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry for who you did it to. If I had been just another passenger, a lawyer, or a doctor who had saved up for a first-class ticket, you would have gotten away with it. You would have gone back to the galley with Karen, laughed about the thug you put in his place, and you would have done it again to someone else tomorrow. Wouldn't you?" He didn't wait for an answer. "The problem isn't that you made a mistake. The problem is you, your mindset, the prejudice you carry with you so casually. You look at me and you don't see a person. You see a stereotype, a profile that you've created in your own mind. And you felt entitled to act on that prejudice, to humiliate me, to wield your minuscule amount of power like a weapon." He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping even lower, making it more intense. "This uniform you're wearing, it's a symbol of my company, my brand. And you just poisoned it. My new ownership of AeroVantage is going to be about excellence, respect, and innovation. It's about building the best airline in the world. And there is no place in that vision for someone like you." He looked back at Harrison. "Robert, your orders stand. But add one more thing. I want this incident to be written up as a case study. I want it used in every single new hire orientation and every recurrent training for every employee in this company, from the ramp agents to the executive suite. I want every person who works for me to know what happened on Flight 762 today. I want them to know that prejudice has a price. And at Aero Vantage, that price is your job." It was a corporate execution, swift and brutal. Jessica finally broke. A sob escaped her lips, a raw guttural sound of pure despair. This was it. The end. She wasn't just fired. She was being made an example of her failure, immortalized in company law as a cautionary tale. David gently took her arm. "Jessica, let's go." She was limp compliant, all the fight gone out of her. As David led her down the aisle, past the silent, staring passengers, she looked like a ghost. She was no longer a flight attendant. She was just a woman in a uniform she no longer had the right to wear, her life irrevocably shattered by a single ugly act of her own making. As she stepped off the plane and back into the jet bridge, she took one last look back. She saw Marcus Thorne, the owner, being attended to by the chief operating officer. The cabin door hissed shut, sealing her out, sealing her fate. The world she had known, the life she had built, was on the other side of that door, and it was a world she would never be a part of again. Jessica's exit from the plane was the beginning of a free fall into a personal hell she could never have imagined. Being fired was a sharp, immediate blow, but the karma that followed was a slow, grinding machine that dismantled her life piece by piece. Before she had even cleared security in the terminal, her story had gone viral. A passenger in business class, a tech blogger with a significant social media following, had recorded the entire exchange with Robert Harrison on his phone. He hadn't captured her initial confrontation with Marcus, but he had captured everything else: Harrison's thunderous arrival, the stunning revelation of Marcus's identity, her termination, and Marcus's final cutting speech. The blogger, a man named Ethan Vance, posted the video with the simple explosive caption, "Flight attendant tries to eject new airline owner from his own plane. It does not end well for her. Aero Vantage our karma." The video was a digital wildfire. Within an hour, it had 1 million views. By the time Flight 762 landed in Los Angeles, it was the #1 trending topic on Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. News outlets picked it up. CNN, Fox News, the BBC, they all ran segments. Jessica's face, contorted in a mask of horrified realization, was plastered across the internet. She was no longer Jessica the flight attendant. She was Airline Karen, a global meme, a symbol of prejudice and entitlement. Her full name was leaked online within hours. Her social media profiles were discovered and flooded with a torrent of vitriol. Thousands of messages, filled with hate threats and gleeful mockery, poured in. Her address and phone number were posted on dark corners of the web, a practice known as doxing. The digital mob was relentless. They were judge, jury, and executioner, and they had found her guilty. The real-life consequences were swift and brutal. Aero Vantage, in a masterstroke of public relations orchestrated by Marcus and Harrison, issued a formal statement condemning her actions and reaffirming their commitment to diversity and respect, leaning into the narrative that Marcus Thorne's new leadership was already purging the old toxic culture. They made her the villain of the old regime, and Marcus the hero of the new one. Jessica tried to find another job. It was impossible. The moment a potential employer Googled her name, her fate was sealed. The video was inescapable. She was a pariah in the aviation industry. No airline would touch her. She applied for jobs in retail, in hospitality, in customer service, but the digital ghost of her actions followed her everywhere. She was unemployable. But the cruelest twist of the knife, the hard karma that turned her personal crisis into a real-life tragedy, was centered on her mother. Her mother, Carol, was suffering from a rare aggressive form of pulmonary fibrosis. She required constant oxygen, expensive medications, and was on the waiting list for a lung transplant. The only reason any of this was possible was because of Jessica's job at AeroVantage. The company's premier health insurance plan was a gold-plated safety net that covered the astronomical costs of Carol's care. When Jessica was fired, that insurance coverage vanished. She was eligible for COBRA, but the monthly premiums were over $2,000 money she no longer had. She frantically applied for Medicaid, but the bureaucracy was slow, and there were gaps in coverage for the specific experimental treatments her mother needed. Within a month, the letters and calls from the medical providers started. The specialty pharmacy would no longer fill her mother's most critical prescription. The home healthcare agency that provided her daily nursing care was suspending service due to non-payment. The transplant center sent a formal letter stating that her mother's eligibility was on hold, pending confirmation of adequate post-operative insurance coverage. Jessica had to watch as her mother, the one person she truly loved, began to decline. Carol's breathing became more labored. The spark in her eyes dimmed. She was suffocating slowly, and it was Jessica's fault. The arrogance and prejudice she had displayed for a few fleeting minutes on that plane were now costing her mother her life. One evening, as Jessica was measuring out her mother's dwindling supply of pills, Carol looked at her, her voice a weak, papery whisper. "I saw the video, Jessie. My friend from church showed me." Jessica froze, her back to her mother. "Mom, that wasn't the girl I raised." Carol whispered, a tear tracing a path through the wrinkles on her cheek. "I raised you to be kind, to see the good in people. What happened to you?" The question, so simple and so pure, shattered the last of Jessica's defenses. All the anger, the self-pity, the resentment, it all crumbled away, leaving only a vast, empty wasteland of shame. "I don't know," she sobbed, turning to face her mother. "I got lost. I thought the job made me important. I thought I was better than him. I was so wrong." This was the true punishment. It wasn't the loss of her job or her reputation. It was this moment. It was seeing the profound disappointment in her dying mother's eyes. It was the gut-wrenching realization that her own moral ugliness had precipitated this tragedy. She hadn't just been unkind to a stranger. She had betrayed the very values her mother had tried to instill in her. She had become the thing she was supposed to despise, and in doing so, she had sacrificed the person she loved most. The laughter that had echoed in that first-class cabin now seemed like a demonic sound from another lifetime, the prelude to a symphony of suffering from which there was no escape. In the year that followed the incident, on Flight 762, Marcus Thorne did exactly what he said he would do. He didn't just fire a problematic employee. He used the moment as a crucible to forge a new identity for AeroVantage. The video, which had destroyed Jessica's life, became the airline's foundational myth in its new era. Marcus launched the AeroVantage Ascend initiative. It was a top-to-bottom overhaul of corporate culture. The case study of the Jessica incident, as it became known internally, was indeed the centerpiece of all training. It was presented without sensationalism, a stark, factual account of the events, followed by a direct message from Marcus himself. In the video, he didn't appear as a gloating victor, but as a determined leader. "Prejudice is a liability," he stated, looking directly into the camera. "It is a drag on efficiency, a poison to morale, and a betrayal of the trust our customers place in us. It is not just morally wrong, it is bad for business. At the new AeroVantage, there will be zero tolerance. We will be a meritocracy, not just in how we hire and promote, but in how we treat every single person who steps onto our aircraft." He backed up his words with action. He created a new executive position, Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer, and hired a renowned sociologist, Dr. Anya Sharma, to fill it. They implemented blind resume reviews for corporate positions to eliminate unconscious bias. They launched scholarship and mentorship programs for aspiring pilots and mechanics from underprivileged communities. They diversified their supply chain, actively seeking out minority and women-owned businesses. The old, stuffy, predominantly white and male board of directors was gradually replaced with a diverse group of dynamic leaders from various industries and backgrounds. AeroVantage's reputation, which could have been tarnished by the incident, soared. They became known not just for their improving service and punctuality, but for their progressive corporate ethos. Bookings increased. Their stock price hit an all-time high. Marcus Thorne was hailed as a visionary, a new breed of CEO who understood that a company's soul was as important as its bottom line. Meanwhile, Jessica's life had bottomed out. Her mother, Carol, passed away 6 months after Jessica lost her job. They had lost the house to foreclosure just a week before. Jessica, consumed by grief and guilt, drifted. She worked a series of dead-end, under-the-table jobs, washing dishes, cleaning hotel rooms, anything where her name didn't matter. The vibrant, confident woman who had once patrolled the aisles of an A380 was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out shell, haunted by the ghost of her mother and the memory of her own spectacular downfall. One afternoon, about a year after the incident, she was wiping down tables at a small, greasy spoon diner on the outskirts of Las Vegas. A television in the corner was playing a business news channel. And there he was, Marcus Thorne. He was being interviewed about the 1-year anniversary of his takeover of AeroVantage. He looked confident, successful, the very picture of a modern mogul. "Mr. Thorne," the interviewer said, "many point to that incident on your flight to LA as the catalyst for the AeroVantage turnaround. Looking back, what do you think the ultimate lesson was?" Marcus paused, his expression thoughtful. "The lesson is that change is hard but necessary. One person's ugly action became a mirror that forced an entire organization to look at itself. It forced us to confront the quiet prejudices that can exist in any system. It wasn't about punishing one person. It was about waking up an entire company. My only regret," he added, his voice softening slightly, "is the collateral human cost. I hope that flight attendant, wherever she is, has found a way to learn from her mistake and build a new life based on the right values." Tears streamed down Jessica's face as she listened, her dirty rag forgotten in her hand. It wasn't pity he was offering or forgiveness. It was something far more profound, a challenge. He was acknowledging her humanity even after she had so thoroughly denied his. He had moved on, built an empire on the ashes of her mistake, and was now, in a way, inviting her to do the same, to learn, to grow, to become better. For the first time in a year, a tiny flicker of something other than despair ignited within her. The guilt and the shame were still there, a permanent scar on her soul. But his words offered a sliver of a possibility, a path out of the darkness. it wouldn't be easy. She could never reclaim what she had lost. But perhaps she thought she could build something new, something small, something quiet. A life where kindness wasn't a liability, but a foundation. The karma had been swift and brutal, but the story wasn't over. The final chapter, the one about redemption, was hers and hers alone to write. That single act of laughter set off a chain reaction that didn't just cost a flight attendant her job, it exposed a sickness, toppled an old guard, and rebuilt an entire corporate empire on the foundations of respect. Marcus Thorne's story is a powerful reminder that in our interconnected world, no act of prejudice goes unnoticed, and the consequences can be more life-altering than we can ever imagine. It's a lesson about power, accountability, and the hard, painful path to redemption. What did you think of Jessica's karma? Was it too harsh, or was it deserved? Let us know in the comments below. And if this story moved, you don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life drama that will make you think.